Hello, everyone. Here we are with another one of our teachers, Mel Beach. Mel, great to be here with you.
Thank you.
And Mel, you're in this fabulous studio. Do you want to introduce yourself and maybe tell us about all this amazing stuff in your background?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Mel Beach. I'm from San Jose, California. I'm an artist, teacher, and lecturer. I kind of geek out over studio stuff. Here I am in my studio space in my home. So it's got spaces for all the different avenues of creativity I'd like to do. It also multitasks as a yoga studio, office, meeting space, a little bit of everything.
Oh, awesome. Okay. And do you do a lot of yoga?
I do almost daily. I do yoga.
Wow. And I know that I don't know a lot about yoga, but there are lots of different types, right? And lots of gurus and so on. Is there a type that
I
you
think it started as a type. A friend and I were going to the gym and taking classes together. And then when COVID happened and the gyms all closed, we were like, well, we've taken the classes. How would we feel about doing it? And we do it via phone. So we call up each other each day. And because we had the classes, we've kind of morphed it probably into our own form of yoga. We often
Mhm.
joke. But it's been a real saving grace, especially during COVID, building up my endurance, flexibility. It's been a wonderful part of my daily curriculum.
Fascinating, because I know there's Heidi Parks in particular, I know does a lot of yoga for quilters, like with hands specifically. But I think it's something that doesn't get talked about very much because we often spend our time like hunched over sewing machines and the wrong size tables and things like that.
I'm very mindful of my alignment. I can feel immediately when I'm just feeling a little bit not hurting, but when things just aren't perfectly aligned. And so I could be mindful and take some steps to either correct my posture or check my ergonomics of my setup to be more comfortable for the many hours that we do for quilting.
I know I kind of live in fear of getting rheumatism in my hands, which would just be a terrible thing for someone crafty. So yes, I know I should pay more attention to these. Well, thank you for that. And it's certainly an amazing background. There's just so much going on there. And that's kind of how you are as well, because obviously you're known as a quilter a lot, but it's certainly not like that's the only craft you've been doing. And I've been following you for a long time now, and you've been doing a lot of experimentation with paper and more on the paper craft side of things recently. How did that happen?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it was also with the pandemic and all the different artists shifting to online and especially mixed media folks. They have their act together and they were really quick to pivot to virtual. And so I did all of these classes and demos. And so it really got into block printing, which I love, carving my own stamps. I got into all kinds of gel plate printing and mark making. And again, I go in, it's mostly on paper, it's quick and easy, but it all translates at some point. It's going to translate back into my fabric, into my quilt making. And with paper, especially when you're playing with like junk mail or brown paper bags, things that were often like going into the recycling bin or waste bin, I tend to be a little more flexible, a lot more freeing with my art because I know I can always make more. For some reason, when it comes to fabric, I tend to treat it as very precious and I must be very planned out. And paper, I just rip into it. I go right into the center if that's a swatch that I need of the color or the pattern. So it's kind of liberating to do a different side of art. I'm also getting into into watercolor painting, which
Ooh.
again, with fabric, we can be very controlling and very organized. And watercolor has sometimes its mind of its own. And so embracing that meditative nature, sometimes, pools of colors that you didn't expect. So those have been really wonderful side little journeys as part of my creative practice.
Amazing. Yeah, because I know with watercolor, you're often waiting for things to dry. And so it kind of forces you to slow down and be more mindful about things. Well, I want to come back to the block printing because I've been fascinated by that. But tell us, how did you first get into quilting?
First into quilting is my last year of grad school, and I had a stack of T-shirts from college, camp, all those, high school that I was no longer wearing. And somewhere I got the idea that you could sew them together into a quilt. I've never made a quilt, but I called up my mother, and the next time she came to visit me, she brought up our old heavy duty, like Kenmore sewing machine, and showed me how to use it. And we put it together, cut up my t-shirts, and found, interesting fronts and backs to showcase, to kind of commemorate those different phases of my life. I will confess it was a bit of a hot mess. I had no idea about 1/4 inch seam, stabilizer, binding, batting, all that stuff, but I loved it. I traveled with that quilt all over the country for various trips. And pretty much as soon as I finished, I went out and bought quilting cotton, haven't looked back. And I did lots of traditional quilting. I can't tell you how many rail fences and log cabins. And so very much self-taught at the beginning from books and magazines, and watching Alex Anderson on Simply Quilts, of course.
Of course, classic. Um, and then at some point you decided, I remember hearing a talk by you, at some point you decided to suddenly start saying yes to all these challenges. How did that come about?
Oh gosh, I've always been intrigued, and I think my guild was one of the first challenges I ever did. They host a quilt challenge often in connection with our quilt guild, or quilt show, or every other year we do a quilt show. And so I thought that kind of piqued my interest. It was all about crazy quilting. So there was all different, they weren't really quilting cottons, they were brocades and silky linings and velvets. And so we had to use, I think, all of them, and only 2 pieces of our stash. And so I really enjoyed kind of the challenge of using fabrics or things that necessarily aren't part of my comfort zone, and putting it together into an original design. And I love seeing what my fellow guild members and how they use the same fabrics that challenged all of us and how they use it. So I enjoy that kind of camaraderie. And so it was kind of a slippery slope into the world of quilt challenges. I think at this point, I've done well over 100 quilt challenges. A lot are through fabric companies, often host quilt challenges. So like Hoffman and Cherrywood are some of the big ones. There's some that I love doing online through Project Quilting. It's by Kim Lepasek, Persimmon Dreams, and she's a huge fan of Project Runway, the TAV reality show. And so she kind of conceived Project Quilting, which is basically January through March. You have 1 week to start and finish a quilt based on a theme, a weekly theme. And so they're fast, furious, not a whole lot of time for procrastination. And I've been doing that for, gosh, 8 or 9 years now. And I really love them. And they kind of stretch my creativity.
I think that stretching of creativity is something that underlies a lot of what you do, or a lot of what you share that you do, because as well as all these challenges, and I mean you've won prizes and awards in these challenges and gone on like international display and so on. So it's not like these are all like guild challenges. These are big stuff. But you also then started doing now are these separate things, the 100-day challenges and the dice as well? Did they
kind
go
of morphed
together?
together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always been fascinated by 100-day projects, but because of my traveling and teaching schedule, I just thought they weren't incompatible. I was like, there's no way I can schlep a sewing machine or a big project to kind of continue that would be interesting to me. And so when the pandemic happened and shut down, the world, including my travel schedule, a friend had pinged me, said, hey, there's a 100-day project starting up in April of 2020. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And I was like, well, I'll start it. And if the world reopens, then I can see. And as we know, that didn't happen that fast. And so with the pandemic, I saw it as a gift of time in many ways, time in our studios. And so I was determined to use that gift of time to improve myself as an artist, to be more intentional with the different color schemes, elements of art. And so I kind of like a little bit of structure, a little bit of rules. I find that helps me. And so I created my first game plan involving rolling the dice. And so basically every day I would roll the dice to get my daily assignment. So one dice determined what color scheme I was going to work with, of few scraps. One dice determined an element of art that I would kind of explore, and then the other one was design principle. And so basically I would go into my studio about 10 o'clock at night. I tend to be a night owl, especially during that time, roll my 3 dice, and basically I call it roll and respond. And so I will say, I had some books and articles on the different, compositions. And so I would sometimes, for the first week or two, kind of look through those pages. Okay, what do they mean by balance? And after about 2 weeks of practicing and creating these little 7-inch compositions, they were all just fused down, raw edge, no stitching. So kind of quick and dirty. Some took me a little bit longer if I had time. But I got really comfortable and really explored all 100 different designs in a small block form, several of which emerged into larger quilts. And so I'm kind of stuck for ideas. I go back to those 100 projects. Okay, what do I like and what might I want to iterate on? I love the process, learned so much. I took 4 whole days off and then jumped into another 100-day project of my own choosing. And so I like that format. I like doing something daily creative. And it was really great to kind of help de-stress during a really stressful time in everybody's lives. So, and pretty much I've done 6 100-day projects, all involving dice. Some I've focused on free motion quilting, design inspiration, what else? Mark making on fabric, block printing, creating little compositions, mixed media this year. So each one I kind of go in with a bit of a game plan. They're all posted on my website. I have a whole gallery dedicated to design by dice. And so if you like any of those ideas and want to kind of take those game plans and make them your own, you're welcome to, because they certainly stretch my my artistry in many ways that were fun and really liberating.
One of the, I think one of the classes I've taken with you is the is it reverse applique mandalas?
Yes.
Using free motion quilting and embroidery. And I was fascinated when more recently, because that was a few years ago, and then more recently, you've been doing the block print mandalas as well. Do you feel like there's a lot of evolution going on as you do all these different things?
I love mandalas, and there's a structure, there's a radial symmetry structure to them, and while there's structure, there's also, at least in my mandalas, very improvisational. I truly start in the center, no matter what technique I'm doing, start in the center and just kind of work my way one ring at a time. And so it started off with whole cloth quilting and then reverse applique. I've done some pieced ones and bias tape ones. And it was just a matter of time as I started doing block printing and growing my collection of hand carved stamps. It's like, I think it was when I did an Om symbol, again, that connects to my yoga practice. I made a little circle Om symbol. And I was like, well, let me see how if I could pull this with some of my other block prints. And it was immediately, I was like, okay, I can do mandalas. And I've just kind of played with those.
That's awesome. Yeah, and there's such beautiful quilts as well, and such a fun thing to do as a class. And is that one of the classes that you have? You have some on-demand classes, right?
I do open enrollment classes. So every quarter or so, I'll schedule a few different open enrollment classes depending on what's interesting, what schedule availability is. And so I try to work that in at least once a year of some kind of, it's magnificent mandalas class. And so if you are really, we kind of go through the whole process of deconstructing a mandala and then, basically kind of creating your own using your favorite shapes, patterns. And so I've had people take it that were into jewelry and metalsmithing. So it's a pretty forgiving and versatile design idea.
Oh yeah, very kind of craft inclusive, and I would definitely recommend it. What, I guess I've got more questions about the 100-day thing. Just this is like I want to know. So I'm going to include them in the interview. How do you stick with it? Because I'm terrible. I'll do like the first 3 days and then be like, oh, that's it.
Yeah, the goal is to do something creative for 100 days. And so at least with the worldwide 100-day project, there's thousands of artists that start at the beginning, and things come up, life comes up, and so they always say if you fall off, get back on, and it's okay. You can either extend your 100-day project, but for me, having that structure, those game plans where I'm rolling, I don't have to dwell over what am I going to do today. I just have to go into my studio, roll, and respond. I have all my supplies there. I kind of gather them leading up to the project. So if it's block printing, I have all my carving and blocks, and so that kind of takes off some of the burden of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do today? Those prompts help me. And because of the community aspect, I think that's really helpful is, you're seeing other artists, you're seeing them create daily. posting daily. I was posting on Instagram and Facebook, and that helped me keep accountable. So there were days I was definitely tired, and it might have been closer to like midnight that I was getting to my studio. But I was like, okay, I don't want to let people down. I don't want to miss that streak. And for me, it's that perfectionist. I don't want to lose that streak. So
Yeah, and I think what you were saying, like the kind of accountability of not wanting to let people down. I know whenever you have some new habit, then an accountability buddy is always good, like the friend that you do yoga with, I suppose, as well. And you said you have your supplies all around you. It looks so organized. Is the rest of your studio as organized as this, the bit that we can't
this
see?
part, I will say I have probably a little pile over there where I kind of move things as I need to. And it's been amazing how my studio evolves to, accommodate my different interests. And so the little cabinet behind me used to be all quilting stuff. It was where all my rulers, all my different notions were. And as I've kind of honed in on different quilting styles, I've gotten rid of some of the more traditional things that I no longer need, or I have other tools that are more versatile. So I'd say half of that cabinet is now paints and different mark making tools. And so as the 100-day projects, I will give some of those like block printing or mark making supplies, I'll give them more prime realty, at least during that 100-day project. So I'm not doing a scavenger hunt, and that emotional, or mental load, I can just kind of reach and grab what I need for that particular day.
Amazing. You mentioned earlier that you have an extensive teaching and workshop schedule. How many kind of talks and workshops do you give a year? I know the pandemic has skewed everything off, but you are very busy.
I am. I love it. And especially with the advent of doing Zoom lectures and workshops and Guild's pivoting to that, it means I can take on way more teaching opportunities because I'm not losing days in travel. And that's also introduced me to a worldwide group of quilters. And so I've gotten to teach for a group in Israel. I've got to teach for groups in Oman. And so it's kind of fun as I get these invitations. I have to sometimes look at a map to see, okay, where are these folks located? And so, any given month, I can have anywhere from 3 to 4 teaching engagements, either lectures or workshops. And so if I have a quiet month from Guildwides, I can supplement with my own open enrollment. And I would say usually December is kind of a time off. That's when I recharge. It's when I do my annual studio cleaning and kind of go through every nook and cranny, because it's downtime from teaching, since most guilds are doing their holiday parties, and most quilters are just super busy with all the festivities that happen during that time of the year.
Yes, I know my local guild will be having a make and take in December, as they always do. One of the international groups of quilters that you're involved with, of course, is SAQA. For people that don't know about them, do you want to just explain what it is and what your role is?
Yeah, SAQA is Studio Art Quilt Associates. We are a global organization with 4,300 members all around the world who are all passionate about art quilts. And so I would say the majority are active art quilters who are practicing artists and making different styles of fiber art. We have a pretty loose definition. It's just referencing layered and stitched. So we actually have one of our members does all of her quilts in like wood, which is really interesting. We have 3D fiber art, which is just, all these sculptural elements, which are just fascinating, kind of a work in engineering as well as art. But we also have a number of members who are collectors, admirers, gallery owners, or museum curators. So it's a pretty robust organization, folks that are in the publishing world. So if you're passionate about art quilts, we've got lots of resources for you. Because of our global nature, we've been doing Zoom well before Zoom was a popular thing with COVID. But we also have regional aspects. We have local connections. So there's many ways of getting involved with Studio Art Quilt Associates. And I'm still currently serving as president through April of 2024. So as you can see, I'm very passionate about the organization and about art quilts.
Now, what does the president of an organization like that actually do? Like, what are your duties?
Well, mostly I'm the president of the board. And so really my focus is on, and we have an amazing board of directors who meet monthly. We're a working board, so we serve on either committees or projects to help advance our mission, which is all about promoting the art quilt. And so, oftentimes it's going to meeting, it's being an ambassador, thanking our volunteers. And so it's a little bit of everything. And it depends on the year. We have virtual conferences, we have in-person conferences. So it's a pretty robust organization with lots of moving parts, lots of volunteers. We also have a number of staff members that are, either full-time or part-time, and they provide a lot of support as well for our volunteer team.
Gosh, yes, I can only imagine all the moving parts with an organization like that. But how fascinating, and to see and interact with all those different artists as well.
It's
That must be
exciting. You
extra.
go to different meetings on Zoom and people be logging in from Germany or Australia. We've had one of our virtual conferences focused all on Oceania, which is Australia, New Zealand, and all the islands that are over there. And it was fascinating to see how their environment often kind of really inspired a lot of their artistry. This upcoming year in 2024, our virtual conference is going to focus on Europe and Middle East. And so there's lots of quilters and art quilters that are living and creating there. And so we'll have some fascinating insights, but it's a lot of fun to go to our different meetings and have, different styles, different backgrounds. It makes it an exciting organization to be part of.
Absolutely. And I'll have a link to them in the interview notes as well. So I suppose with so many artists kind of within your eyeline, are there specific inspirations, like people who are inspiring you currently or have in the past that you can think of?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, and I'm afraid to name any because I'm going to leave some out.
Right.
Certainly being part of my local guild, Santa Clara, we've had amazing, national teachers come on a monthly basis. I was guild historian, so I got to sit right next to them as I was taking pictures of the meetings and show and tell. So that was always fun to kind of pick their brains and see their incredible quilts up close and personal. So I took a lot of workshops and listened to a lot of lectures and just picked up so many nuggets of inspiration, tips and tricks, lots of things to add to my quilter's toolbox. And so oftentimes I go off and take like 5-day classes at either Asilomar, Empty Spools, or Art Quilt Tahoe. And so that's why I'm enjoying kind of deeper dives with some different artists that I really admire, that have different techniques that I'm really curious about. And very rarely, I tell people I'm usually a terrible student because I tend to sit in the back and kind of go rogue and make things my own. I'm there about the techniques, and just trying to pick, kind of get that inspiration. So I have fun and try to make it my own.
Oh, brilliant. And of course, we're recording this in November and it'll be broadcast in January. Have you already got things in mind for 2024, the techniques and workshops that you would like to go to?
Oh, well, I'm really curious. I've been curious about the human face and portraitures. I think it's something a lot of times when I'm thinking about goals and planning out what workshops I do, I kind of think about what are my fears and how can I overcome them. So that's something I'm kind of plotting and planning. Maybe I'm starting to do a little bit of stuff. I did some eye carving, carving an eyeball the other day, which was really kind of fun. So I'm starting to gather supplies and kind of do my research, and it may be part of a 100-day project I haven't quite finalized yet. So,
Oh, that's very exciting. Okay. And I guess you've done so much, like with all the challenges and all the speaking and everything. Are there any specific achievements you're particularly proud of?
well, we're recording in November, but October is our big Pacific International Quilt Festival here in Northern California. It's one of the biggest shows on the West Coast for quilting. And I remember when I used to live in the Northeast in New York, and so I moved cross country in 2010. And somewhere I heard about PIQF, and I had no idea. I'd been to a few guild shows back in New York, but never to a major national show, and still fairly new to quilting. And I went to PIQF my first year, and I went home almost in tears because the quilts were so spectacular. You've been there,
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah.
quality of design and workmanship. I mean, it's a international show. We have artists from all over the world that have exhibits and whatnot. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is intimidating. So it was just a few months later, I joined my local guild. I'd never been part of a guild before, and started taking classes and workshops through local quilt shops through the guild. And I went back the following year and I was like, I think I know how they did this and how they made different. I started recognizing some of the techniques from the workshops I'd taken. And I think it was 2015 when I finally got the courage to enter my first quilt. And I got 2 quilts into PIQF. I was super proud. And I think it was just a few years later, next year, I got an honorable mention. Few years after that, I got 3rd place ribbons. I've been teaching there for 3 years. So not only am I exhibiting, but I've been teaching. And this year I had the honor of being one of the judges. And so it's been kind of a fun journey from being a total novice and to now being recognized as an industry expert and enough to judge the quilts that are part of that show.
That is a fabulous transition from first time visitor to actually judging the thing. And of course, you were a judge for the San Francisco Quilt Guild, which is my local quilt guild, earlier this year. How do you get into judging?
Well, there's a number, there's certainly some organizations that are doing judging certification, national, I have to look up the accreditations, but they do a certification. It's a pretty, depending on the organization, it can be very rigorous. I've started the process through this one organization, going through a 2-day seminar on judging and we did some mock judging and all these different pop quizzes of recognizing different techniques and workmanship and how do we evaluate the different styles, because that's what's so exciting about the quilting world. It is so broad. There are so many different approaches to quilting, and really being an experienced judge is staying atop of the different techniques, the trends, etc. And then part of it is just, as groups start to recognize you as being a judge, you get invited to do judging for them. And so I've done quite a few county fairs and guild shows here in Northern California. And it's truly always an honor to be invited to be a judge, to be trusted with, people's babies in many ways. I mean, they're sending their projects that they've invested a lot of time, creativity, and it can be a vulnerable position to be sending your creations out into the world to be judged. And really, as a judge, we're there often, depending on the show, it's really looking at the design and the workmanship. And so those are the different standpoints we look at. And it's, a lot of people think it can be very subjective, but, good design, there are those elements of art and design principles. And so while I might have certain color preferences in my own art practice, very open-minded about judging. And I really look at what is the design merits of this piece and what are the, really recognizing the construction, the workmanship that goes into making each and every quilt.
And of course, I know with PIQF, you have to put labels over labels and things like that. So everything's anonymized. So you don't know that this is your best friend's quilt, for example. Yeah. How do you feel like the judging has added to your own practice, like your own artistic practices?
Absolutely. I mean, being introduced to so many different quilt styles and being able to really critically evaluate in a good way. It's not that we're nitpicking every little detail, but be able to kind of critique and see the merits of those, elements and to celebrate those, different uses of color. And so there's always certain quilts that, got ribbons or didn't get ribbons. Sometimes there's some really incredible ones, but the competition is just certainly steep in certain categories. And I wish I could give out more awards. But I'm always kind of, picking out, ooh, I really like what they did here, or I love this color combination. And so I think a lot of that definitely comes back into my own art practice.
Yeah, it's fascinating how getting involved with all these different activities can contribute to your practice overall. I think the only thing we haven't talked about is your own workshop that you're going to be doing. So tell us about that.
Well, we're going to go back to dice rolling, and coming out in January. I love January. For me is like a fresh start, and I know a lot of people set resolutions for the new year, and we're going to do some resolutions, but they're not going to be the traditional losing weight, going to the gym, eating healthy. It's going to be all based on creativity and quilting. And so we'll be rolling the dice to hopefully help people with their quilting resolutions or their creativity. And so give them some ideas as to how they can roll the dice to Oh gosh, some of the things like, how they can make more art if they want to. I'm just checking my notes. If they want to tidy up their studio or supplies, I know a lot of people like, oh, I gotta get organized this year. And so give them some tips and tricks for that. UFOs. I know some quilters have UFOs. I think most people have a lot of UFOs. So that's often a popular resolution. How do I work down this list and finish up some of my UFOs? What else? Learning new techniques, design, inspiration. So hopefully I'll have most of the resolutions that are in your audience covered. And if not, hopefully there'll be lots of inspiration that they can kind of custom create their own game plan for a really fun, creative 2024 using dice.
Absolutely. And of course, as well as the workshop recording, we've also got the Facebook group where people can share those resolutions and ideas and techniques. So yes, there's lots of opportunity for learning from each other.
Maybe find an accountability partner, that can go in
Absolutely.
together and clean our studios or work on our UFOs, and maybe find a little sub community of folks to kind of help keep them engaged for the year.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's a fantastic idea. Well, look, Mel, it's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. I feel quite honored because you are one of my quilting heroes, one of my inspirations. So thank you for making the time. And I'm really looking forward to watching your workshop.
Well, thank you, Alex. It's truly an honor to be invited. I'm so excited that you're taking this undertaking of this great big vision. I think, the mixed media world, they've been having their fun for years, and it's time for the quilting world to also enjoy being introduced to all these amazing teachers and hopefully find some connections. So thank you for taking this on and hosting us all.
No, thank you. All right. Well, thanks, Mel.
You're welcome. Thank you.